At UFC St. Louis, the Black Beast Derrick Lewis is back, and he will look to extend his all-time knockout record in the UFC. He currently sits at 14. He's looking for his 15th knockout victory. Can he secure it this weekend, or will the number 15 ranked Rodrigo Nascimento get the biggest win of his career and make it 4 straight victories? The 39-year-old former heavyweight title challenger Derrick Lewis will enter the UFC octagon for the 29th time in his career this Saturday night. Rodrigo Nascimento, this will be his 7th UFC fight since earning a contract on Dana White's Contender Series back in July of 2019 on Season 3 of the show. So Lewis has 4 times the amount of UFC experience coming into this fight. And if you look at it in total, he's got 40 professional fights. Nascimento has 13. So he more than triples him in total professional experience. And then you want to add on even more to that vast difference in experience is the high level competition that Derrick Lewis has faced. I mean, you can go back years and years before you find someone that was ranked not in the top 15, and really even outside of the top 10, they're rare to come by over the past few years, where Nascimento's biggest victory is against Don'Tale Mayes in his last fight, maybe Ilir Latifi, since he has done a few more big fights than Mayes. I mean, and he's beaten Mayes twice now that I'm looking at it. He beat him back in 2020 as well. There is just a very vast difference. The biggest step up in competition for Nascimento came in October of 2020, and it was a fight that he lost to Chris Daukaus, and we've seen what has happened with Chris Daukaus' career since 2020. I mean, just on that poster behind me, he main evented with Curtis Blades and got knocked out. So big step up here for Nascimento, but he did crack into the rankings after his last fight. He is going to be 8 years younger than Derrick Lewis. Only been finished once in his entire career. Derrick Lewis been finished 9 different times. So he definitely has that going on his side. But man, this is one of the more drastic experience differences you're going to see in a UFC main event. Now, in terms of size, these two fellas come in around the same size. 6'3" for Derrick Lewis, 6'4" for Nascimento. Only a 1-inch reach differential, and they both come in top in the scales, usually in the high, or not high, but the mid to low 260s. Derrick Lewis has finished 23 of his 27 victories. Nascimento has finished 8 of his 11. It would seem as though someone will be going to sleep and going to sleep quickly. Now, Nascimento has 6 submissions to his name, and we've seen Derrick Lewis only be submitted twice. You know, he has that mythical fighter where he gets down on the ground, but you can't do anything to him, and he just stands up. So can Derrick Lewis just stand up again here versus Nascimento? And if that's the case, if this is on the feet, I see a very hard time for Nascimento trying to win this fight standing. Derrick Lewis could get back into the win column after losing 4 of his last 5, if and only if he keeps this standing. And for Derrick Lewis, prior to his short notice replacement bout where he stepped in to fight Jailton Almeida in Brazil last November, when a fight that did go all 25 minutes, a dominant decision for Almeida, he had went 8 fights in a row, all finishes, whether he was winning or being finished, and only went to the 3rd round once in those 8 fights. But for Nascimento, this 3-fight win streak that he is on that I alluded to earlier, they have all 3 gone the distance. Tanner Boser, Ilir Latifi, and Don'Tale Mayes for the 2nd time. He did finish Don'Tale in their first fight 4 years ago. So again, I feel like although things aren't going Derrick Lewis's way as of late, more signs point toward Lewis in this one than the side of Nascimento, if you ask me. And we know that Derrick Lewis has main evented time and time again, whereas Nascimento has never had to main event a fight card, and it's in front of a live crowd in St. Louis, a crowd that hasn't had fights in many years, so you would have to imagine they're going to be very excited, especially when they see Derrick Lewis and his hot balls walk down to the octagon. For this one, it's simple. Derrick Lewis is trying to get back on track, forget about the losing 4 of his last 5, start a new win streak, if you will. He said he still feels fresh and even hinted at maybe a WWE appearance one day and doing the Rikishi stink face as his finishing maneuver. And for Nascimento, he's trying to, as I've already said, get the biggest win of his career and climb near the top 10 in the heavyweight division, a division that is not all that deep and does not take that many victories to climb into the top 5, the elite, the title contenders of the world in this weight class. Let me know in the comments below who you think will take it in the main event of UFC St. Louis. Will it be the veteran Derrick Lewis? Will it be the newcomer in Rodrigo Nascimento? Give me your predictions below. And now that we are done talking about the main event, let's hop into the rest of UFC St. Louis. There are a couple other good fights that we got to mention on here. The co-main event will feature St. Louis's own Joaquin Buckley coming in on a 3-fight win streak after catapulting himself into the welterweight rankings at number 11 with his last victory just a couple months ago, not even, on March 30th when he knocked out Vicente Luque in the second round on short notice, may I add. Buckley has really put it all together these last few years, and this 3-fight win streak shows just that. He is taking on the 2-0 in the UFC Nursulton Ruizboev, who has not went to a decision since December of 2019. For his first 2 UFC fights, Ruizboev has combined for 4 minutes and 35 seconds of cage time. He knocked out Cedric Dumas on that very same card that Joaquin Buckley knocked out Vicente Luque, and before that, got a victory over Bruno Ferreira last July. And while the well-roundedness of Buckley has really begun to make itself known in his career the past few years, it's going to be hard to ignore the size difference in this fight. Now, for what it is worth, Joaquin Buckley does have the same exact reach as Ruizboev at 76 inches, but Nursulton is 6'5", a massive 170-pounder. Buckley is only 5'10", so a 6-inch height advantage here for Nursulton. He's 30 years old. Buckley is also 30 years old. 2 guys that are in their primes or just now entering their primes. I think this makes for a fight that you simply cannot miss. Buckley looks to continue climbing the ranks at 170, and Nursulton looks to crack into the ranks in just his 3rd UFC fight. And I'm going to be honest, the featured bout of the evening is getting slept on. I've not seen a lot of people talking about this, but we have 2 guys that are absolutely on a tear right now. The one is the number 11 ranked Alonzo Menifield, and the other is Carlos Ulberg. Menifield is on the best stretch of his entire professional career, having won 6 of his last 8 fights with a draw squeezed in there, so only 1 loss, and that is to William Knight back in December of 2021. His draw came in February last year against Jimmy Crute, but outside of that, he's looked damn good, getting finishes, getting convincing decisions, and everything in between. And for Black Jag Carlos Ulberg, he has won 5 straight fights, with 4 of them in a row being by finish. Menifield is an OG of Dana White's Contender Series dating back to Season 2 in 2018, where he got a knockout in the first round, made his UFC debut in January of 2019, and has faced really good competition thus far throughout his 5-year career. And Ulberg was a Dana White Contender Series alum during the 2020 season. He fell short in his debut in March of 2021 against Kennedy Nzechukwu, who got knocked out, but since then, he's been undefeated and perfect. These 2 have went to 7 combined decisions in 29 total fights. This is going to be violent. Someone is looking to make a statement. Ulberg looking to make it 6 straight wins and his first crack into the UFC top 15, at least that I can recall. Of course it would be, actually, because he's won 5 straight fights. Obviously, he would be ranked already if he hadn't been before. And for Menifield, if he wins here, he's talking a top 10 opponent next at 205. I really like this next fight in the featherweight division between Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres, who is just on the outside of the top 15, taking on the sniper Sean Woodson. For Alex Caceres, he's won 7 of his last 9 fights and has obviously been in the best stretch of his UFC career. The only 2 losses are both to ranked fighters, one in Sadiq Youssef and the last one in August to Giga Chikadze, in a performance where Giga looked very, very good in his return. And for Woodson, he's a 2019 Season 3 alum of Dana White's Contender Series and has only lost one fight in the UFC, and that was back in June of 2020 against Julian Erosa. Outside of that, he's on a tear. He does have a draw to Luis Saldana, but outside of that, he's been beating people and having very good performances. He's a very long, rangy fighter, and so is Alex Caceres, which is what makes this fight so interesting. And it's always crazy to see the pictures that will inevitably surface this week, showing that Sean Woodson did in fact used to fight at heavyweight. And while I did mention that Caceres is a long, rangy fighter in his own right, it's very hard to live up to the metrics that Sean Woodson poses in this division because he is 6'2" compared to Caceres being 5'10". So we have a 5-inch height advantage, and the reach, 78 inches worth of reach at 145 pounds, is dangerous for someone that has hands like Woodson. Caceres coming in at 73.5, so giving up 4.5 inches of reach and 5 inches of height. Uphill climb, but Caceres has proved that he can win fights like this before. For Woodson, this would definitely be the biggest win of his UFC career thus far. And then I got to talk about a strawweight fight going down buried on the prelims for some odd reason. We have Tabatha Baby Shark Ricci, who is the number 11 ranked strawweight in the world, welcoming back Tecia, the Tiny Tornado Pennington, formerly known as Tecia Torres. Tecia has not fought since April of 2022 in what was a losing effort to Mackenzie Dern. She has since had a baby with her partner Raquel Pennington and is returning for the first time in over 2 years. Now, prior to that loss to Dern, she had won 3 straight fights against Angela Hill, Sam Hughes, and Brianna Fortino. And for Tabatha Ricci, she's coming off of just her second UFC loss and what I believe to be the only loss in the UFC at 115 pounds, because I think she fought Manon Fior in her debut fight in the UFC at flyweight. Before Ricci's loss in November against Lupe Godinez in what was a very competitive fight between two top 15 ranked fighters, she had tallied off 4 straight victories, the last 2 against Jessica Penne and Jillian Roberson. She is a very, very good fighter, only 29 years old with a 9-2 record, great grappling, very strong physically on the ground with her wrestling and jiu-jitsu skills. Tecia been known to utilize her grappling and wrestling in her own right in the past. How will she look coming in after 2 years away? She's 34 years old now, so not too far out of reach for her to make another climb and jump back into the rankings. She never necessarily lost her spot, just due to the inactivity with the baby. She was pulled from the rankings, so this could be a great way for her to launch herself right back into the discussion. So while that's all I'm going to talk about in terms of the storylines, X's and O's, if you will, there are other good fights on this card. Chase Hooper versus Slava Claus. Terrence McKinney is fighting Esteban Ribovic. That should be a very violent fight. Charles Johnson and Jake Hadley are fighting early on the prelims. Diego Ferreira is returning back on this card to fight Matos Rebecki. I mean, there are good fights scattered throughout this 13-fight card. I know there may not be a ton of names that jump out on the page at you, but this is a good, solid card. I hope the fans in St. Louis enjoy. If you're going, be sure to let me know. Take some pictures while you're down there. On the arches, I saw Derrick Lewis posing and whatnot as well. I'm looking forward to this card. This will be 3 straight cards. Knock on wood. This is recorded before weigh-ins, where there will be 13 fights on a card back to back to back. So give me all of your predictions for UFC St. Louis in the comments below. Who you think is going to take the victory in the main event alongside the rest of the cards we broke down here in today's video. If you enjoyed this discussion, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new so you never miss my breakdowns such as these where I go over the X's and O's and more so the storylines heading into every single fight. I also recap the most meaningful results every single week and give my thoughts and opinions on breaking MMA news and fight announcements. Join the community on social media at the BAJ MMA and follow on your favorite audio listening platform. If you like one long form podcast episode, they get released every Friday and Monday on platforms such as Spotify, Apple, and more. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video.